Hey everybody, I'm Morgan.
And I'm Julia.
Welcome to our podcast. Our topic of discussion for today will be F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. Let's start off with a joke. Hey Julia.
Yeah.
What was Jay Gatsby's favorite superhero?
I have no idea.
The Green Lantern. Get it? Because of Daisy's dock. And
Wow.
Who was Gatsby's least favorite superhero?
Who, Morgan?
Deadpool, because he died in a pool.
Wow. That was pretty good. No, wait. Actually, that was pretty terrible. Alright, let's get into the actual point of the podcast. I think any person who has read The Great Gatsby could recognize the themes tied into the novel. But today we're going to do a deep dive into those ideas and really try to analyze them and discuss their importance in building the book as a whole.
As well as this, we will be discussing the author's perspective on the most important of the themes.
Let's get right into it. When you think of The Great Gatsby, your mind is automatically brought to the world of the 1920s. You think of the glitz and the glam, the parties and the scandals. But we're going to start by focusing specifically on the idea of division woven throughout the novel.
There was a clear divide between the rich and the poor in The Great Gatsby. But the cracks in society went deeper than just that. The rich class was also divided into two separate groups, the East Egg and the West Egg.
The East Egg was full of old money, people who grew up around money, and the only way they knew how to live was with a full bank account. The West Egg had its social climbers, who had made something of themselves with new money, while the Valley of Ashes was bleak and covered in ash and soot, and represented the lowest and poorest people in the novel.
A good example of the division between groups would be evident by analyzing the Valley of Ashes, the West Egg, and the East Egg. In Nick Carraway's words, the West Egg was the less fashionable of the two. His words represent the difference in culture and values between the two sections.
I think we need to talk about the two different divides that drove the novel. There was rich versus poor, and old money versus new money. The Valley of Ashes was the class of the throwaways. The rich had built their empires on the backs of the poor that lived there. The Valley of Ashes was dirty and rotten, but it was only a train ride away from the millionaire mansions and private golf courses of the East Egg. When describing Daisy's voice, Nick said, "It was full of money that was inexhaustible charm that rose and fell in it. The jingle of it, the cymbal's song of it. High in a white palace, the king's daughter, the golden girl." He described her as basically living the high life in her pristine white palace, while in the Valley of Ashes, ashes take the form of houses and chimneys and rising smoke. I really think it's an interesting comparison to draw between the two, the clean and dirty, the dark and light. Fitzgerald was able to develop contrasting atmospheres that implanted the reader into the two worlds in The Great Gatsby.
By the presence of the abundance of trash in the Valley of Ashes, it can be inferred that this comes from the surrounding areas. This trash demonstrates the exploitation and abuse that is inflicted upon the poor in order for the rich to enable their own lifestyle. An example in the book of exploitation would be between George and Tom. George works at his garage in the Valley of Ashes and works for Tom throughout the novel. The irony of this is that the poor, George Wilson, is only becoming poorer, while the rich, Tom Buchanan, is becoming richer. And George is the only one doing the real work. This also seems to represent difficulty in social mobility at the time.
It all comes back around to the self-conscious East Egg, who are convinced that a big house and a shiny necklace will mean that people around you will respect you. When Daisy's baby was born, she said, "I'm glad it's a girl, and I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in this world, a beautiful little fool." A foolish daughter could be a smiling girl who could hang on the arm of any man and be happy and oblivious to the horrors of the world that Daisy had already lived through. The people who viewed themselves to be the top of the food chain, so to speak, their life was just about appearances, and every emotion they have is just on the surface. Daisy was upset about Tom's affair, but not enough to leave him.
That's a really good point about appearances. You can really see that when looking at Tom and Gatsby, for example. They had the same amount of money and resources, but Tom was viewed as a respectable and strong man, while Gatsby was just a poser who had made something of himself, but because he wasn't raised with money, it wasn't in his blood. The society of the East Egg as a whole is more concerned about how the general public is viewing them instead of the actions that they will partake in or what leads to their happiness. Daisy was not worried about her own happiness, but what her fellow upper-class members would think.
Like, Daisy stayed loyal to Tom at the end of the novel, but she knew he was hysterical and volatile, and, in Daisy's words, a brute of a man, a great, big, hulking physical specimen. But she was in love with Gatsby, who was already madly in love with her, to a point of almost crossing the line into obsession. He had gone to the end of the earth for her, to make enough money for them to live comfortably, but then he went and made more money just so she could maintain her lavish lifestyle and he could shower her with all the gifts that he thinks she deserves. But she still couldn't take the leap because she knew that society would look down upon her for being with Gatsby because he didn't have money in his blood.
Not only would society look down upon her for going with Gatsby, but during the time period, divorce was also highly looked down upon, which made her feel as if she couldn't do anything. The amount of wealth and the emphasis on appearance of the characters also affect how honest the characters are. Because the citizens of the East Egg have a colossal amount of wealth, they are extremely concerned as appearing rich. Their desire to do this encourages them to be deceitful.
When people are only concerned about how they look to others, they are willing to be dishonest and immoral. Not only the rich are concerned about their appearances, but also those who are looking to become rich.
Gatsby's obsession with Daisy drove him to look for mass wealth, and in doing so, become more willing to lie and be deceitful. When Nick asked if Daisy was driving the car that hit Myrtle, Gatsby responds, "Yes, but of course I'll say that I was." The closer Gatsby got to his dreams, the more he was willing to sacrifice everything, and the method that got Gatsby closer to his dreams was attaining wealth. Although Gatsby was a fairly humble character, he was corrupted as he began to gain the lifestyle that he wanted.
That is a really good point about Gatsby, one of the protagonists of the story, becoming closer to the antagonist characters morally. As well as this, Gatsby was dishonest in achieving the American dream. The American dream expresses an idea that any person, no matter their social status, can break down the barriers and move upward in society. When Gatsby comes up with an elaborate lie about his past life, he does this because he's concerned with appearing as less than the people around him. He also is dishonest in his methods of gaining that wealth.
I think Gatsby represented the American dream because he was able to come from a lower social class and achieve high status regardless of his method. Many Americans wished to achieve this during the time period, especially when coming from a low class like Gatsby did. However, Gatsby's wish is not to achieve the American dream for himself. Everything that he does is for Daisy. As he is showing her his home in the West Egg, he looked at her the entire time and, in Nick's words, seemed to revalue everything in his house according to the measure of a response that it drew from her well-loved eyes. Everything that he's bought, everything that he owns, and all of the parties that he's thrown serve the sole purpose of impressing Daisy.
Fitzgerald further claims in the close of the book that the American dream is unrealistic. One quote by Fitzgerald represents the hopelessness of this dream due to the way society is set up. He did not know that the dream was already behind him, somewhere back in the vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Daisy seems to be a symbol of a lost dream for Gatsby that seemed just out of reach, but in reality she was just shallow, superficial, and unable to have given him all that he had been searching for in her.
Tying back to the American dream, Gatsby's death by the end of the novel represents just how temporary Fitzgerald views the American dream to be. This may also demonstrate how Gatsby's dishonesty and his concern with appearance for the sake of impressing Daisy affected his fulfillment in achieving the American dream from an extremely low class. These faulty attributes could have led to his death, which was representative of his failure in achieving his dream of gaining Gatsby and more wealth.
That concludes our podcast, guys. Thank you so much for listening. We had so much fun producing this episode. So if you want us to be able to make more episodes like this one in the future, please, please, please go to our GoFundMe in the description box below and donate so we can continue to do what we love to do.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a great night, and we're out.
Woo!
They're a rotten crowd. They're worth the whole damn bunch put together.